I should have crossed the street 5 minutes earlier. That's what I tell myself now, standing at this corner with rain soaking through my jacket like it has a personal vendetta against me. The traffic light burns red against the gray November sky, and I'm trapped here, water pooling in my sneakers, my hair plastered to my forehead in dark strands that drip steadily onto my nose. The city moves around me in blurred streaks of yellow headlights and brake lights, the kind of urban symphony that usually comforts me, but tonight feels overwhelming. Car tires hiss against wet asphalt, sending up sprays of dirty water that catch the glow of street lamps. People rush past with their umbrellas tilted like shields, their faces hidden beneath hoods and scarves, each of them part of a world that seems to know exactly where it's going. I don't know where I'm going. I never do. My fingers are numb around the strap of my messenger bag, the canvas heavy with rainwater and the weight of too many books. I should have stayed in the library longer. Should have waited for the storm to pass instead of foolishly thinking I could outrun it. But the fluorescent lights had started to feel suffocating, the whispered conversations of other students pressing against my concentration until I couldn't focus on the Keats essay I'd been struggling with for hours. So here I am, 21 years old and shivering at a crosswalk like some abandoned thing, watching the world blur past in watercolor washes of gray and gold. The cold seeps through my jacket with methodical precision, finding every gap in the worn denim, every place where the fabric has thinned from too many washes and too many lonely walks through this city that always makes me feel smaller than I am. That's when a shadow falls across me. It happens so quietly I almost don't notice at first. The rain that had been drumming against my scalp suddenly softens, becomes distant. I look up, blinking water from my eyes, and see the dark canopy of an umbrella stretched above my head. My heart does something complicated against my ribs. Gabriel. He's there beside me, close enough that I can smell the faint scent of his soap beneath the rain, something clean and warm that makes my chest tighten. His umbrella is large enough to cover both of us if we stand close, and he's positioned it carefully so that most of the protection falls over me, while his own shoulder catches the overflow from the edge. I know him, of course. We sit 2 seats apart in Professor Chen's seminar on romantic poetry, and I've spent more time than I care to admit studying the careful way he underlines passages in his books, the precise handwriting that fills the margins of his notebooks. He's the kind of person who speaks thoughtfully when called upon, who asks questions that make the professor pause and consider. The kind of person who seems to understand something about the world that I'm still trying to learn. But we've never spoken beyond the polite exchanges that happen when papers get passed back or when someone needs to borrow a pen. He exists in my peripheral vision, a presence I'm always aware of, but never brave enough to approach. Now he's here, and the umbrella creates an intimate space between us, a small pocket of shelter in the chaos of the storm. I can hear him breathing, steady and calm, while my own breath comes in shallow bursts that I hope he can't hear. Stay close, he says, and his voice is lower than I remember from class, warmer somehow in the enclosed space beneath the umbrella. The words are simple, practical even, but they settle somewhere deep inside me, in a place I didn't know existed. I don't trust myself to speak, so I just nod and shift slightly closer. Our arms brush, just the barest contact through wet fabric, but it sends electricity shooting up my spine. I wonder if he feels it too, this sudden charge in the air that has nothing to do with the storm above us. The traffic light continues its stubborn red glow, and I find myself grateful for the delay. In the harsh light, I steal glances at Gabriel's profile, trying to memorize the clean line of his jaw, the way his dark hair curls slightly where it's gotten damp despite the umbrella. There's a drop of water clinging to his lower lip, and I have to look away before my thoughts spiral somewhere dangerous. He's beautiful, but it's more than that. There's something about the way he holds himself, the quiet confidence that seems so different from the performance of masculinity I see in other guys our age. He doesn't take up more space than he needs. He doesn't make himself the center of every moment. Instead, he moves through the world with a kind of careful attention that makes me think he notices things other people miss. Like me, standing alone in the rain. I wonder how long he was watching before he stepped forward with his umbrella. The thought makes my cheeks warm despite the cold. I wonder if this is kindness or something else, something I don't dare name, even in the privacy of my own mind. The umbrella tilts slightly as Gabriel adjusts his grip, and more of his shoulder emerges into the rain. I start to step away to give him more room, but he shifts closer instead, closing the gap between us until I can feel the warmth radiating from his body. My breath catches in my throat. This is not about the rain anymore. I can feel it in the careful way he's positioned the umbrella, in the deliberate closeness of his presence beside me. Something is happening here at this intersection, something that feels bigger than shelter from a November storm. The city continues its relentless motion around us, but beneath the umbrella, time seems suspended. I'm hyper-aware of every small detail, the rhythm of Gabriel's breathing, the way his free hand hangs at his side, fingers slightly curved as if he's thinking about reaching for something. The space between us feels charged with possibility and terror in equal measure. I've always been good at living in the margins, at observing from a safe distance. I write poems I never show anyone, fill notebooks with thoughts I'll never speak aloud. I build a life around careful solitude, around being present but not truly seen. But standing here with Gabriel, pressed close beneath this fragile canopy while the storm rages around us, I feel exposed in a way that should frighten me more than it does. Instead, there's something else stirring in my chest, something that feels dangerously like hope. The traffic light finally shifts to green, but neither of us moves immediately. For a heartbeat that stretches into eternity, we stand frozen at the edge of the crosswalk, rain drumming against the umbrella above us, the city rushing past in streaks of light and shadow. Then Gabriel takes the first step forward, and I follow, staying close like he asked, my shoulder brushing his as we navigate the crosswalk together. The pavement is slick with rain and fallen leaves, and once I stumble slightly on an uneven patch of concrete. Gabriel's hand appears at my elbow, steadying me, and even through the wet fabric of my jacket, his touch burns. By the time we reach the other side of the street, I know with absolute certainty that this moment will divide my life into before and after. Before Gabriel appeared with his umbrella, before the space between us became charged with unspoken questions, before I learned what it felt like to be seen and chosen by someone who could have kept walking, I have always lived in the quiet corners of life. Even before Gabriel appeared with his umbrella, even before that crosswalk became the axis on which my world turned, I understood myself as someone who observed rather than participated, who found safety in the spaces between other people's stories. My dorm room reflects this perfectly. Books line every available surface, spines creating a rainbow of faded colors against the institutional white walls. Volumes of poetry lean against novels, philosophy text crowd next to collections of short stories. I've arranged them not alphabetically, but by some internal logic that makes sense only to me, grouped by the way they make me feel rather than by author or subject. There's a notebook on my desk, leather-bound and filled with poems I write in the small hours when sleep won't come. Verses about loneliness that feels like a second skin, about watching the world through windows both literal and metaphorical. Words I've never spoken aloud, thoughts I've never shared with another living soul. The notebook stays closed when my roommate is around, hidden beneath textbooks and class notes like some shameful secret. But it isn't shame exactly. It's more like protection. The poems are too raw, too honest about the ache I carry in my chest, the way I move through days that feel measured and contained, like I'm living inside a snow globe that someone forgot to shake. I write about the fluorescent hum of the library where I spend most of my free time, tucked into a corner corral on the third floor where the literature section gives way to obscure academic journals. I write about the rain that seems constant in this gray city, the way it turns everything soft and blurred at the edges. I write about the feeling of being 21 and somehow already resigned to a life of beautiful solitude. What I don't write about, what I've never found words for, is Gabriel. He's been in Professor Chin's seminar on romantic poetry since the beginning of the semester, always arriving exactly 3 minutes before class begins and settling into the same seat 2 rows ahead of mine and slightly to the left. I know this timing because I've been watching, cataloging his habits with the same attention I give to memorizing verses. Gabriel moves through the world differently than other people our age. There's no performance in the way he carries himself, no attempt to take up more space or speak louder than necessary. When he contributes to class discussions, his voice carries a quiet certainty that makes Professor Chen lean forward slightly, as if Gabriel's insights require closer attention. I've watched him underline passages with mechanical precision, his handwriting neat and economical in the margins of worn paperbacks. He reads Keats the way other people read sacred texts, with reverence and careful attention. During our discussion of Ode to a Nightingale, he spoke about the tension between beauty and mortality in a way that made my chest tighten with recognition. He's the kind of person who draws people in without trying. I've seen classmates gravitate toward him after lectures, drawn to his unguarded laughter and the way he listens with his whole attention. But he's never seemed to notice me, sitting in my careful corner, taking notes and avoiding eye contact. We live in the same neighborhood near campus, a fact I discovered entirely by accident 3 weeks into the semester. I was walking back from the late-night laundromat, my arms full of warm clothes that smelled like industrial detergent, when I saw him emerging from the building 2 blocks from mine. He was carrying a cup of coffee and walking with the unhurried pace of someone comfortable with solitude. I stayed a careful distance behind him, not following exactly, but not turning away either. I watched the way streetlights caught in his dark hair, the way he paused to let an elderly woman with a small dog cross in front of him. Small gestures that spoke to something gentle in his character, something that made my throat feel tight. After that, I found myself taking longer routes to class, paths that might intersect with his morning walk. Not hoping to speak to him exactly, but drawn to these glimpses of who he was outside the seminar room. I learned that he stops at the same coffee shop every Tuesday and Thursday, that he reads while he waits for his order, that he always says thank you to the barista with genuine warmth. The city around us provides the perfect backdrop for these small observations. November has settled over everything like a gray blanket, bringing constant rain that turns the streets into rivers of reflected light. Cafes steam with condensation, their windows fogged and inviting. The library becomes a refuge, its warm yellow light spilling on its sidewalks slick with fallen leaves. In this landscape of muted colors and soft edges, Gabriel stands out not because he's loud or attention-seeking, but because he seems so completely himself. There's an integrity to the way he moves through rainy mornings and fluorescent-lit classrooms, a quality that makes me think he's never pretended to be someone else to make other people comfortable. I envy that authenticity, that ability to exist without apology or explanation. I've spent so long living carefully, measuring my words and gestures, that I've almost forgotten what it feels like to simply be. Watching Gabriel has become its own form of education, a masterclass in how to inhabit your own life without reservation. But until the umbrella, until that moment at the crosswalk when he chose to step into the rain with me, I never imagined he saw me at all. I was content to admire from a distance, to write poems about the particular shade of concentration that crosses his face when he's thinking through a difficult passage. Now everything has changed. The umbrella encounter has cracked something open in my carefully constructed solitude, letting in light I didn't know I was missing. Gabriel knows I exist. More than that, he chose to shelter me from the storm. Sitting in my book-lined room tonight, listening to rain tap against the windows, I can still feel the warmth of his presence beside me, still hear the quiet certainty in his voice when he told me to stay close. For the first time in my life, the margins don't feel like the safest place to be. The umbrella moment becomes a beginning rather than an ending. After we cross the street together, our shoulders brushing in the careful choreography of shared shelter, Gabriel doesn't simply disappear back into his own life. Instead, he walks with me. The rain continues its steady percussion against the umbrella above us, and with each step toward my building, I become more aware of the heat radiating from his body beside mine. The space beneath the umbrella demands closeness, and every slight adjustment we make to avoid puddles or navigate around other pedestrians brings us into contact. His arm brushes mine. His hip bumps gently against my side when we sidestep a woman walking her dog. Each touch sends electricity racing through my nervous system, and I wonder if he can sense the way my breathing has become shallow and careful. I've never been this physically close to anyone for such an extended period, and the intimacy of it feels both thrilling and terrifying. We don't talk much during the walk. The rain provides its own conversation, filling the spaces where words might go with its constant whisper against fabric and pavement. But the silence doesn't feel empty. Instead, it feels charged with possibility, heavy with things we're both thinking but not yet brave enough to say. When we reach my building, Gabriel pauses at the entrance, shifting the umbrella slightly between us. The gesture creates a small pocket of space, and suddenly I can breathe again, though I'm not entirely sure I want to. Maybe we should study together sometime, he says, and his tone is casual enough that it could mean nothing more than academic convenience. But his eyes betray something deeper, a flicker of vulnerability that makes my chest tighten with recognition. I nod too quickly, the movement jerky and graceless. Of course, I manage to say, though my voice comes out rougher than intended. That would be good. He smiles then, just a slight curve at the corner of his mouth, but it transforms his entire face. For a moment, I see past the quiet confidence he wears like armor, glimpse something softer underneath. Then he's stepping back, folding the umbrella with practiced efficiency. "I'll see you in class," he says, and walks away into the rain without looking back. I stand in my building's entrance for a long time afterward, watching his figure disappear into the gray evening, trying to parse what just happened. The rational part of my mind insists it was simple kindness, nothing more. But my body still hums with the memory of his closeness, still carries the imprint of his warmth along my side. 3 days pass before he follows through. 3 days during which I replay every moment of our walk, analyzing each word and gesture for hidden meaning. I arrive at Professor Chin's seminar early, positioning myself with a clear view of the door so I can watch Gabriel enter. He nods at me when he takes his seat, a brief acknowledgement that makes my pulse quicken. On Thursday afternoon, I'm in my usual corner of the library, surrounded by books on romantic poetry and struggling with an analysis of Blake's Songs of Innocence and Experience, when a chair scrapes against the floor beside me. Gabriel settles into the seat with the same quiet efficiency he brings to everything, pulling out a notebook and pen. He doesn't ask if he can join me, doesn't make a production of his arrival. He simply appears, as if studying together was always part of our routine. "Mind if I work here?" he says, though he's already opening his notebook to a page covered with neat handwriting. The question feels rhetorical, but I shake my head anyway, not trusting my voice. Having him this close in the bright fluorescent light of the library feels different than sharing space beneath an umbrella in the rain. Here, I can see the details I missed in the storm. The way his pen moves across the page with deliberate precision. The small scar near his left temple that disappears into his hairline. The focused concentration that settles over his features when he reads. Our conversation starts awkwardly, limited to questions about assignments and observations about the poems we're analyzing for class. But gradually, as the afternoon deepens into evening and other students filter out of the library, our discussion becomes more personal. He tells me about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, about the relief of finding anonymity in the city. I share my own experience of feeling simultaneously visible and invisible, of moving through the world as an observer rather than a participant. There are moments when our conversation drifts towards something more intimate, when his questions probe gently at the edges of who I am beneath the careful exterior I present to the world. He asks about my writing, and I find myself admitting to the notebook of poems, though I don't offer to share them. "You should let people read your work," he says, his voice quiet but certain. "I think you have something important to say." The comment catches me off guard, and I look up to find him watching me with an intensity that makes my skin warm. For a heartbeat, the library around us fades away, and there's only this moment, this connection sparking between us across a table covered with books and papers. When Gabriel offers to walk me home, I accept without hesitation. The rain has returned, lighter now, but persistent, and he produces the same black umbrella from his bag. This time, when he pulls me close beneath its shelter, there's no pretense of practicality. His arm slides around my shoulders, drawing me against his side with deliberate intention. I can feel the steady rhythm of his breathing, can smell the faint scent of his soap mixed with the paper and ink smell of books. Every step we take together feels choreographed, as if we're learning a dance we've never performed but somehow already know. At my building's entrance, he doesn't immediately step away. Instead, he lets the umbrella tilt slightly, allowing rain to mist across our faces as he looks at me with an expression I can't quite read. "Same time tomorrow," he asks, and it's not really a question. I nod, unable to form words around the hope and terror rising in my throat. Gabriel smiles, that same small curve of his lips that transforms everything, and disappears once again into the rain. Standing alone in my building's warm lobby, I realize that the careful life I've built around solitude and observation is already changing, already becoming something larger and more complicated than I ever imagined possible. Our lives begin to weave together in ways that feel both inevitable and miraculous. What started as studying together twice a week expands into something more complex, more necessary. Gabriel appears in spaces I didn't know I was saving for him, filling gaps in my routine I hadn't realized existed. The library becomes our shared territory. We claim the same corner table on the third floor, arriving separately but within minutes of each other, as if drawn by some internal compass that points toward connection. Our books intermingle across the scarred wooden surface. His copy of Lyrical Ballads rests against my Norton anthology. My notebook lies open beside his, our handwriting creating parallel conversations in the margins. Sometimes we work in focused silence. The only sounds the scratch of pen on paper and the distant hum of fluorescent lights. Other times our discussions spiral into territory far beyond our assignments, touching on philosophy and art and the strange weight of being young in a world that feels both infinite and impossibly small. Gabriel has a way of asking questions that unlock parts of myself I didn't know I'd hidden away. He wants to know about my hometown, about the books that changed me, about the moments when I first understood that words could be arranged into something beautiful enough to break your heart. His curiosity feels genuine, unhurried, as if my answers matter in ways I'm not used to believing. Coffee after class becomes routine without us ever discussing it. We walk to the small cafe near campus where Gabriel orders the same thing every time, black coffee with 1 sugar, while I experiment with different combinations, searching for something that matches the complexity of what I'm feeling. The conversations over coffee are different from our library discussions, more personal somehow. Gabriel tells me about his childhood in rural Vermont, about long winters spent reading by wood-burning stoves and summers helping his grandmother tend her garden. There's a gentleness in the way he describes those years that makes me understand something fundamental about who he is, about the quiet strength that draws me to him. I find myself sharing stories I've never told anyone. The way I felt invisible through most of high school, moving through hallways like a ghost while other people live their lives in bright, loud colors. The relief of coming to the city, of finding spaces where I could disappear without feeling erased. "You don't seem invisible to me," Gabriel says one afternoon, his fingers wrapped around his coffee cup in a way that makes me want to reach across the table and touch his hands. "You seem like someone who notices everything but doesn't demand to be noticed back." His observation feels like being seen through clear water, every detail of who I am suddenly visible and somehow acceptable. I'm not used to being understood so precisely, and it terrifies me as much as it thrills me. The walks home stretch longer with each passing day. We take circuitous routes through neighborhoods that have nothing to do with efficiency, past bookstores and small parks where streetlights create pools of yellow warmth in the gathering darkness. When it rains, which it does almost constantly, Gabriel's umbrella creates our private world, a space where normal social distances collapse into something more intimate. Under awnings and beneath the dim light of bus stops, our conversations drift toward the edges of confession. Gabriel lingers in my building's doorway after walking me home, his hand resting against the door frame as if reluctant to leave. Sometimes he stands there for entire minutes, and I can feel the weight of things he wants to say pressing against the space between us. The almost touches multiply. His hand brushes my wrist when he passes me a book. Our knees bump under the library table, and neither of us moves away. When he helps me with my jacket after a particularly long study session, his fingers graze the back of my neck, and I have to concentrate on breathing normally. There's a night when we're walking back from the library through a light drizzle, sharing the umbrella in the careful choreography we've perfected over weeks of practice. Gabriel stops suddenly under a streetlight, turning to look at me with an expression I can't read. "You're easier to be around than anyone else," he says softly, and the words settle in my chest like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that spread outward until my entire body feels transformed. I don't know how to respond to such honesty, so I nod and try to smile, though my throat feels too tight for words. We stand there for a long moment, rain tapping against the umbrella above us, the yellow light casting everything in warm, intimate tones. Gabriel reaches out then, his fingers barely grazing my cheek, so light I might have imagined it. But I feel the touch like electricity, like something fundamental shifting between us. His hand drops back to his side, and we continue walking, but the air around us has changed, charged with possibility and the weight of things we're not quite ready to name. Later, alone in my room with rain pattering against the windows, I write in my notebook for the first time in weeks. But instead of the usual verses about loneliness and observation, I find myself trying to capture something new. The feeling of being seen, of being chosen for quiet moments and shared silences. The terror and wonder of discovering that someone else's presence can make the world feel both larger and more manageable. I write about the way Gabriel's voice sounds when he says my name, about the careful attention he pays to things I say, about the growing certainty that what's happening between us is more than friendship, more than coincidence. The tension keeps building like rain pressing against glass, waiting for something to break through. I know the risks of reading too much into gestures, of naming feelings that could destroy the fragile thing we're building. But lying in the dark, listening to the city's nighttime sounds filter through my window, I can't deny what's growing in the spaces between our words, in the careful distance we maintain and the moments when that distance collapses. Something is changing, has already changed. The question now is whether we're brave enough to acknowledge what we both know is true. The revelation comes on a Tuesday night in late November, when the rain falls with unusual violence and the wind carries the sharp promise of winter. We spent the evening in a library as usual, but tonight felt different from the beginning. Gabriel seemed restless, distracted, his usual focused attention scattered across the pages of his book like leaves caught in a storm. Our conversation had been stilted, full of false starts and trailing silences. I caught him looking at me several times when he thought I wasn't paying attention, his expression unreadable but intense in a way that made my skin feel too tight. By the time we packed up our books and prepared to leave, the tension between us had grown so thick it felt like another presence at our table. The storm hits us the moment we step outside. This isn't the gentle drizzle we've grown accustomed to navigating together, but something fierce and uncompromising. Rain drives horizontally across the campus quad, and the wind howls between buildings with a sound like something wounded and desperate. Gabriel struggles with the umbrella, fighting to keep it oriented against the gusts that seem to come from every direction at once. We huddle close together, but the umbrella provides little protection against weather this determined. Within minutes, we're both soaked despite our efforts, water streaming down our faces and seeping through our jackets with methodical persistence. We make it perhaps 3 blocks before the inevitable happens. A particularly vicious gust catches the umbrella and flips it inside out with a sound like breaking bones. Gabriel swears under his breath, wrestling with the twisted metal and fabric, but it's hopeless. The umbrella dangles from his hand like a broken wing, utterly useless against the storm's fury. For a moment, we stand there in the middle of the sidewalk, completely exposed to the elements, looking at each other with a kind of shocked disbelief. Water plasters Gabriel's dark hair to his forehead, and I can see rivulets running down his face, collecting at the point of his chin before dropping onto his soaked jacket. Then something shifts in his expression, and he starts to laugh. Not the polite chuckle I've heard in class, but something deeper and more genuine, bubbling up from some place in his chest that I've never seen him access before. The sound is infectious, and I find myself laughing too, great gulping sounds that mix with the rain and wind until I can't tell where my laughter ends and the storm begins. We stand there laughing like children, completely drenched and ridiculous. And for the first time since I've known him, Gabriel looks utterly unguarded. His careful composure has been washed away by the rain, leaving something raw and beautiful in its place. Without thinking, he reaches out and grips my arm, pulling me close against his chest to shield me from the worst of the wind. The laughter dies in my throat as suddenly as it began. We're pressed together now, closer than we've ever been, close enough that I can feel the rapid beat of his heart against my ribs through our wet clothes. His arms come around me, strong and sure, and I can smell the rain in his hair, can feel the warmth of his body even through the layers of soaked fabric. The world around us becomes a blur of streetlights and rushing water. But all I can focus on is the solid reality of Gabriel holding me, protecting me from the storm even though we're both already beyond help. We stay like that for a long moment, breathing hard from laughter and exertion, the rain continuing its assault around us. I can feel his chest rising and falling against mine, can sense the exact moment when something fundamental shifts between us. Gabriel pulls back just enough to look at me, his hand still resting on my shoulders. His eyes search my face with an intensity that makes my knees weak, and I see something there I've been hoping for and dreading in equal measure. The careful distance we've maintained, the polite boundaries we've constructed around ourselves, suddenly feel as flimsy as the broken umbrella hanging from his wrist. His eyes drop to my lips for just a moment, then back to my eyes, and I see him make a decision that changes everything. The kiss is tentative at first, just the gentle press of his mouth against mine, soft and questioning. But when I don't pull away, when I lean into him instead, something ignites between us. His hands move to frame my face, fingers tangling in my wet hair, and he kisses me with a hunger that steals what little breath I have left. The storm rages around us, but all I can feel is the warmth of Gabriel's mouth on mine, the way his body curves protectively over me even as he takes what he wants. I've been kissed before, fumbling encounters in high school that left me feeling hollow and confused, but this is something entirely different. This feels like coming home to a place I didn't know I was looking for. When we finally break apart, both of us breathing hard, Gabriel rests his forehead against mine. Rain continues to stream down our faces, but neither of us seems to care anymore. I couldn't keep pretending. He whispers, his voice barely audible over the wind, and the words carry the weight of weeks of careful distance, of conversations that circled around truths we were both afraid to speak. His confession hangs in the air between us, fragile and precious as spun glass. For the first time, neither of us is hiding behind politeness or careful friendship. The truth is finally spoken aloud, raw and honest as the storm that surrounds us. I reach up and touch his face, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw, learning the reality of him in a way I never dared imagine. He leans into the touch, his eyes closing for just a moment, and I understand that this moment has been inevitable from the very beginning, from that first day when he appeared beside me with his umbrella and told me to stay close. We're still standing in the rain, still completely soaked and shivering, but everything has changed. The careful architecture of our friendship has collapsed, washed away by the storm, leaving something much more dangerous and necessary in its place. The days that follow the kiss exist in a strange liminal space, suspended between what we were and what we might become. We return to our routines as if nothing has changed, meeting for coffee and walking to class together, but everything feels different now. The air between us carries a new weight, charged with the memory of rain and the taste of confession. Gabriel doesn't mention what happened that night, and neither do I. We move through our conversations with careful politeness, discussing Blake and Wordsworth and the upcoming final exam as if we haven't crossed some fundamental line. But I can feel the kiss in every pause between words, in every moment when our eyes meet across the library table and quickly look away. The silence becomes its own presence, growing heavier with each passing day. I find myself studying Gabriel's face during class, searching for some sign of what he's thinking, but his expression reveals nothing. He maintains the same quiet composure he's always worn, and I begin to wonder if I imagined the hunger in his voice when he told me he couldn't keep pretending. At night, alone in my room, I replay the moment obsessively. The feeling of his hands in my hair, the warmth of his mouth against mine, the way he held me like I was something precious and fragile. But in the harsh light of day, surrounded by other students and the ordinary business of academic life, it starts to feel like something that happened to someone else. I write about it, of course. My notebook fills with fragments trying to capture the feeling of transformation, of being seen and chosen and kissed in the rain. But the words feel inadequate, too small to hold the magnitude of what shifted between us that night. By Friday, the silence has become unbearable. We're sitting in our usual cafe, nursing our usual drinks, and the conversation has died into one of those stretch pauses that feel like standing at the edge of a cliff. Gabriel stares into his coffee, as if it holds answers to questions he doesn't know how to ask. I watch him struggle with whatever he's trying to say, see the tension in his shoulders and the way his fingers drum against the ceramic cup. The afternoon light filtering through the cafe windows catches in his hair, and I have to resist the urge to reach across the table and touch him. Finally, he looks up, and his eyes carry a vulnerability that makes my chest tighten with recognition. The careful mask he wears in public has slipped, revealing something raw and uncertain underneath. "Do you regret it?" he asks, and his voice carries both fear and hope in equal measure. The question hangs between us like smoke, and I realize this is the moment that will determine everything that comes next. My throat feels dry, but I shake my head without hesitation. "No," I manage to say, the word coming out rougher than I intended. I've never felt more myself. The confession surprises us both. I hadn't planned to say something so honest, so revealing, but the words emerge with the force of truth that can't be contained. Gabriel's expression shifts, relief and something deeper flooding across his features. "I'm terrified," I continue, the words coming easier now that I've started, "of what people will think, of what this means, of how everything could change. But I'm not sorry it happened." Gabriel reaches across the table then, his fingers brushing against mine in a touch, so light it could be accidental. But his eyes hold mine steadily, and I see my own fear and wonder reflected back at me. "I've never felt like this before," he says quietly. "I didn't know I could feel like this." His admission cracks something open in my chest, a space that floods with warmth and possibility. We sit there in the bustling cafe, surrounded by the ordinary sounds of other people's conversations, but feeling completely alone together. His fingers stay where they touch mine, not quite holding hands, but not pulling away either. The choice isn't simple, even now. I can feel the weight of what we're contemplating, the risk of being seen together in a way that will invite questions we might not be ready to answer. This small city, this campus community where everyone knows everyone else's business, suddenly feels impossibly small. But as I look at Gabriel, at the way he's watching me with such careful attention, I realize the greater risk would be stepping back now, pretending this connection doesn't exist. I've spent my whole life living carefully, choosing safety over possibility, and I'm tired of being afraid. That night, when Gabriel offers to walk me home, the gesture feels different than it has in weeks. We move through the rain-damp streets with new awareness. the space between us electric with unspoken understanding. When he takes my hand as we walk, his fingers lacing through mine with deliberate intention, I don't pull away. His hand is warm and slightly rough, and the simple contact sends shivers up my arm that have nothing to do with the cool evening air. We don't talk about what this means, don't analyze the implications, or discuss the risks. Instead, we walk in comfortable silence, our joined hands swinging slightly between us. At my building's entrance, Gabriel doesn't immediately let go. He turns to face me, our hands still connected, and I can see him gathering courage for something. I don't want to pretend anymore, he says softly. I don't want to act like I don't think about you constantly, like I don't want to be with you in ways that terrify me. His honesty takes my breath away, and I find myself nodding before I can overthink the implications. Me neither, I whisper back. When he leans in to kiss me again, it's different from that desperate moment in the storm. This is deliberate, chosen, a promise rather than a confession. His lips are soft and warm, and I can taste the sweetness of hope on his tongue. We break apart slowly, reluctantly, and I see my own wonder reflected in his eyes. The world around us continues its relentless motion, but we stand still in our small pocket of certainty, finally brave enough to name what we've both known for weeks. The rain that had been threatening all evening finally begins to fall, light drops that catch the streetlight like scattered stars. Gabriel smiles, that transformative expression that makes everything else fade away, and I know that tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow, we won't have to pretend. 3 weeks later, we find ourselves back where it all began. The same intersection, the same red light burning against the gray December sky, the same steady percussion of rain against pavement. But everything else has changed. Gabriel stands beside me, close enough that our shoulders touch, his umbrella tilted to shelter us both from the winter storm. It's a new umbrella, black like the first one, but smaller, more intimate in the way it draws us together. We don't fight the closeness anymore, don't maintain the careful distance that once felt so necessary. His free hand finds mine, fingers lacing together with the easy familiarity we've developed over these past weeks of not pretending. The simple contact still sends warmth racing up my arm, still makes my pulse quicken, but now it also carries the comfort of something chosen and sustained. The rain falls harder than it did that first night, drumming against the umbrella with the intensity of seasons changing. December rain is different from November's gentle persistence. It's sharper, more urgent, carrying the promise of snow and the weight of winter settling over the city like a blanket. I look up at the night sky, water dripping from the umbrella's edges in silver streams that catch the streetlight. The darkness above us feels vast and welcoming rather than overwhelming. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel small beneath its enormity. I feel connected to something larger than myself, anchored by Gabriel's presence beside me and the warmth of his hand in mine. The traffic light shifts to green, but we don't move immediately. Instead, Gabriel turns to look at me, his expression soft in the amber glow of the street lamp. Rain has misted across his face despite the umbrella's protection, and I can see droplets clinging to his eyelashes, making his dark eyes seem to shimmer. "Ready?" he asks, and though he's talking about crossing the street, I hear the deeper question underneath. Ready for whatever comes next, for the life we're building together, one careful step at a time. I nod, squeezing his hand gently, and we step into the crosswalk together. Our movements are synchronized now, the result of countless walks through rain-soaked streets, of learning how to share space beneath an umbrella without constantly negotiating distance. We move as one unit, connected by more than just the shelter above our heads. The past 3 weeks have taught me things about myself I never expected to discover. I've learned that I'm braver than I thought, capable of walking through campus with Gabriel's hand in mine, even when I catch curious glances from classmates. I've learned that love doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures, that sometimes it arrives quietly in the space between one breath and the next, in the decision to stay close when everything inside you wants to run. Our relationship has settled into rhythms that feel both new and eternal. Morning coffee before class. Afternoons in the library where we work with our legs tangled beneath the table. Evening walks that stretch longer with each passing day. Gabriel reads me passages from books that move him, his voice low and reverent in the lamplight of my dorm room. I share poems from my notebook, finally brave enough to let someone else witness the private landscape of my thoughts. We've had our first fight, a small thing about scheduling and misconnections that taught us how to navigate disagreement without losing each other. We've had our first night spent entirely together, talking until dawn about childhood fears and adult dreams, about the strange courage required to love someone openly in a world that doesn't always make space for that love. Gabriel has become more than the person I admired from across the seminar room. He's become my anchor and my adventure, the steady presence that makes me feel safe enough to take risks I never imagined possible. When he laughs at something I've said, when he looks at me like I'm the most interesting person in any room, I understand what it means to be chosen. As we reach the other side of the street, Gabriel stops beneath a streetlight, just as he did that first night. But this time, when he looks at me, there's no uncertainty in his expression, no careful weighing of possibilities. There's only certainty, warm and sure as sunlight. He leans in and kisses me, right there on the sidewalk with rain falling around us and the city moving past in streams of light and sound. The kiss is soft and unhurried, a celebration rather than a confession, and I can taste the sweetness of contentment on his lips. When we break apart, Gabriel smiles that transformative smile I've come to treasure, and I see my own joy reflected back at me in his eyes. The umbrella provides imperfect shelter, allowing rain to mist across our faces, but neither of us minds anymore. We continue walking, our steps in perfect rhythm, Gabriel's arm around my shoulders drawing me close against his side. The rain keeps falling, will always be falling in this city that brought us together, but it no longer feels like something to endure. It feels like music, like the soundtrack to a love story I never dared imagine I could be part of. At my building's entrance, Gabriel doesn't say goodbye. Instead, he follows me inside, his hand still warm in mine, the umbrella dripping forgotten in the doorway. We climb the stairs together toward whatever comes next, no longer afraid of the questions we might face or the risks we're choosing to take. The lasting image I carry is this: two figures walking beneath a fragile canopy, pressed close against the storm, carrying the weight of silence transformed into something precious. The rain continues to fall outside my window as Gabriel settles beside me on my narrow bed, his presence no longer a source of wonder, but of deep, abiding peace. I am no longer the person who lived in the margins, who watched life from a safe distance. I am someone who chooses to stay close, who has learned that the greatest shelter isn't from the storm, but in finding someone willing to stand in it with you. The umbrella lies folded by the door, ready for tomorrow's rain.